Hello, today we're going to be looking at 8.4, again another extension of 8.4. In this case we're going to be talking about day 5, which is about inverse trig functions, and we'll talk about what that means in just a second. Before we get started though, you will need chapter 8 notes packet and a calculator. I'm probably printing off the 8.4 day 5 worksheet before we do that. So press pause if you need to, gather that materials, and we'll be back here in a second. Okay, take a minute to write this down. You press pause. So again, we're going to be, and it's really not as scary as it sounds, inverse trig functions. The only difference is that we're going to be finding angles versus side lengths, which is what we did in previous lessons. So if we know the sine, cosine, or tangent of an acute angle, then you can use what you know using your calculator to find the angle, which is the inverse of the trig ratio. So first we have inverse sine. Again, if you know two legs, the adjacent and the hypotenuse, you can work backwards to figure out what angle has that measure. Our other two inverse functions are inverse cosine. And again, cosine we're going to use when we know adjacent and hypotenuse, and that will help us figure out the angle measure when we know adjacent and hypotenuse. And the last one, tangent. Inverse tangent. If angle A is an acute angle and the tangent of A is is x, then the inverse tangent of x would be the measure of angle A. So, and then just the notation I want to make note of here is that when we're finding angle measure, we're going to be using this minus sign, and that's going to be important as we look at the graphing calculator, or the calculator in general. We're going to be using the buttons that are kind of highlighted there, and in order to access those buttons, what we are going to need to do is first press the second button. That will give us access to inverse sine, inverse cosine, inverse tangent. So I'm kind of showing you the steps here in order to enter this on your calculator. So if we had, for instance, if we had the fraction 1/2, so we had the cosine and we didn't know the angle, we would type it into the calculator. Second button, the sine inverse button, the number 1 divided by 2, close your parentheses, and press enter. So we'll practice that as we go through the lesson today. So the first example here, they're asking us to find the measure of a certain angle. In this case, they're asking us to find P. So just like we did in previous lessons, we have to indicate what do we know here. So here's my hypotenuse, and this would be my opposite. This would be my adjacent. Well, I don't know the opposite here, so I'm going to have to use the trig function inverse cosine. So I'll set this up for you. So we go cosine -1, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to make that fraction for cosine. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so we would go 13/19. So to kind of see this in action, I'm going to pull up the calculator here, and again watch my steps. Second cosine, and we're going to type in 13 divided by 19, and we're going to press enter. So we're going to get that the angle is approximately this here, 46.8. So let's see if I can bring that over there. So we get that as our answer. So we're going to round to the nearest tenth. So that angle angle P is going to be approximately equal to 46.8. Okay. Moving on to the next problem. So again, here we're trying to find the measure of angle D, which is here. So we have to identify our parts. Here's my opposite. Here's my hypotenuse. So we're going to be using inverse sine. So it'll be sine -1, and we're again then going to write our fraction. Opposite is 16/23. Second, this time we're going to use inverse sine, and then we're going to type 16 divided by 23. Enter. And we should get 44.07. So off to the side. and that is going to round to 44.1. And I want to note here, just as I was looking at some people's homework, again, your calculator needs to be in degree mode. So to check that again, we just want to press this mode button right here, make sure it's flashing on degree. If not, it's going to give us answers in radians, and that is what we're going to talk about later on in more like advanced math. So here are our answer, and this is the 2 problems from our worksheet for today. So if you take that out, and again, we're just going to go over some examples, and then a lot of this is just going to be calculator work. So our first example, we have the angle where the question mark is, which makes this the adjacent, this my hypotenuse. So we're going to be using cosine -1, and we're going to put in our fraction. Our adjacent is 16, our hypotenuse is 48, and we just type that into the calculator. Like that. Second cosine, and we're going to type 16 divided by 48. Press enter, and we get it's 70.5. So our angle right here is 70.5. So our other example over here has to do with this angle here, and what we're going to be doing is labeling our sides. This is the opposite, this is the adjacent. We haven't done a tangent one, but it's pretty much going to be the same thing. So we're going to go tangent -1, and it's opposite, so 37/40. Again, just bring our calculator back in here. Quit. Okay, and we're going to do second again. Press the tangent inverse button, and then we're going to go 37 divided by 40. Press enter, and we get our angle measure, which is basically 42.8. Pull that over here, and get our answer, 42.8. And again, just remember to check to make sure your calculator is in degree mode. If you notice that the calculator was an option for you to download on Schoology,